The night of the breakout. The sound of alarms shattered the silence across Rikers Island. Red lights flashed against the prison walls as guards shouted into their radios. Inmate counts off. We got 2 missing. Repeat, 2 inmates are missing from Block C. Inside the control room, a guard stared at a monitor in disbelief. The security footage showed 2 shadowy figures crawling through a drainage tunnel, disappearing into the black water beneath the prison. For years, everyone said Rikers was unbreakable. Nobody had ever made it this far. But tonight, 2 men had done the impossible. Outside, the wind whipped across the East River. The tide was rising, the water cold enough to kill a man in minutes. Somewhere in that darkness, 2 prisoners were fighting for their lives, caught between freedom and death. But how did it come to this? Who were they? And what pushed them to risk everything for a chance that could end in a watery grave? To understand that, we have to go back to the start of their story. Rikers Island isn't just a jail. It's a city of cages, a world hidden behind razor wire, where survival means staying quiet and keeping your head down. For most inmates, every day is the same: fights, noise, bad food, and worse dreams. But for Marcus Holloway and David Raines, every day was another reminder that they didn't belong there. Marcus, known inside as Slim, was doing 10 years for an armed robbery gone wrong. He'd always said he was innocent, that the gun wasn't his. But nobody listened. David was different, a small-time hustler caught on a minor drug charge. He thought he'd be out in a few months. That was before his case got lost in the system. Months turned into years. Hope turned into anger. And anger turned into something darker, a need to escape. They met in solitary confinement. Marcus had been thrown in the hole after a fight with another inmate. David was there for talking back to a guard. The walls were thick, but sound still traveled. One night, Marcus tapped twice on the wall. David tapped back. That's how it started. 4 days, they talked through those walls, about food, their families, and the outside world, about freedom. And then, one night, Marcus whispered through the crack, "I found a way out." At first, David laughed. Nobody escaped Rikers. Not alive. But Marcus wasn't joking. Working in sanitation, he'd learned every corner of the lower tunnels, the ones most guards didn't even know existed. He knew which pipes carried air, which carried water, and which led straight to the East River. It was dangerous, maybe impossible, but it was a chance, and a chance was all they needed. For the next 4 to 7 days, the 2 planned in secret. Every night, while the rest of the block slept, they timed the guard steps, the camera sweeps, and the power flickers. They stole scraps of metal to make small tools. They hid pieces of plastic trays under their beds to turn into paddles later. Marcus even used toothpaste to soften the screws on a maintenance panel that led down into the drainage system. They never spoke about it out loud. A single word overheard could mean a beating, or worse. So they talked in code. "You hear the rain" meant guards nearby. "Time to clean" meant move tonight. The closer they got, the harder it became to hide the fear. Every day, someone got caught with contraband. Every night, the warden ordered random searches. One mistake, and the plan would die before it began. Finally, the night came. February 16th, cold, quiet, and moonless. Perfect. At 2:13 a.m., Marcus checked his watch. David nodded. The hallway was empty. A guard was watching TV at the far end, half asleep. Marcus whispered, "Now." He removed the last screw from the panel and pulled it loose. The smell hit first, wet metal and sewage. The tunnel below was dark and narrow, but it was freedom. One by one, they slid down into the black. The sound of dripping water echoed all around them. The air was freezing. They crawled on their stomachs, dragging their gear through the muck. It felt endless. Above them, the faint hum of electricity and voices reminded them how close they still were to being caught. Then, halfway through the tunnel, they heard it, a sound they weren't supposed to hear. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. A guard's voice shouted, "Who's down there?" Marcus froze. David looked back, panic in his eyes. The guard must have noticed the missing screws. They were out of time. The water beneath them was rising fast, rushing through the tunnel like a living thing. The tide was early. In 30 seconds, the part behind them would be flooded. Marcus turned to David and whispered, "We go now, or we die here." David hesitated for just a heartbeat, then nodded. Together, they pushed forward, crawling faster, the roar of water chasing them from behind. Then, without warning, the ground gave way. The tunnel dropped into a large drain pipe. They fell straight into the freezing water of the East River. The current slammed them against the concrete walls. They gasped for air as icy waves swallowed their shouts. Above them, alarms screamed. Guards were already flooding the area. Searchlights swept over the river, but the water was too dark to see anything. Marcus grabbed David's arm, pulling him toward a piece of floating debris. "Hold on," he yelled. But the river didn't care. The current tore them apart, spinning them in opposite directions. In that moment, all Marcus could see was a prison fading in the distance, its sirens echoing like ghosts. For the first time in years, he was outside the walls, free, but drowning. He tried to swim, but his body was numb. His lungs burned. Somewhere behind him, David screamed his name before another wave dragged him under. Marcus reached out blindly, fighting against the current, searching for anything to grab. His hand brushed against something, a metal chain hanging from a buoy. He wrapped his fingers around it and held on for dear life. The wind howled. The water slapped against his face. His body was shaking uncontrollably. He could barely see through the rain. But across the river, he thought he saw it, the faint glow of the city. Freedom. But then, through the roar of the storm, he heard something else. A motor. A prison patrol boat was heading straight toward him, its spotlight slicing through the night. Marcus took a deep breath, looked up at the blinding light, and let go. He disappeared beneath the surface as the spotlight swept over the water where he had been just seconds before. The guard radioed in, "We lost visual. I repeat, we lost visual." The river went silent. Only the sirens from Rikers could be heard echoing in the distance. Was Marcus dead? Or had he just pulled off the most daring escape in Rikers Island history? Nobody knew. But one thing was certain. That night, Rikers Island changed forever. The man who vanished under the East River. The water was black and cold as death. Marcus Holloway sank fast, the current dragging him deeper and deeper under the surface. His chest burned as he kicked his legs, fighting to reach the light above him. He opened his mouth to scream, but icy water filled his throat instead. He was seconds away from blacking out when his hand hit something solid, a pipe. He pulled himself toward it, scraping his skin on the rough metal. He pushed upward with everything he had left. Then, suddenly, his head burst through the surface. He gasped, choking, shivering uncontrollably. He looked around. The prison lights were faint in the distance now, glowing like tiny stars behind a wall of fog. The river was wide, wild, and empty. No guards, no boats, no David. For the first time in 10 years, Marcus was free and completely alone. The rain fell hard, mixing with the salty spray. He turned, calling out, "David, David." But there was no answer, only the endless roar of the water. Somewhere out there, his only friend was either fighting to stay alive or gone forever. Marcus kicked toward the shore, his limbs numb and heavy. Every stroke felt like lifting 1,000 pounds. The current pushed him back toward the island again and again. But he didn't stop. Not now. Not after everything. Minutes felt like hours. His body trembled as he finally reached a rocky edge near the Bronx side of the river. He clawed at the stones, pulling himself out of the water, coughing, shaking, barely breathing. His prison jumpsuit clung to his skin like ice. He collapsed on the cold ground, his heart pounding. He was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he'd done it. But his victory lasted only seconds before he realized the world around him wasn't welcoming him home. It was quiet, too quiet. He could hear the faint echo of sirens on the other side of the river. Helicopters circled overhead, their lights sweeping across the dark water. The hunt had already begun. Marcus needed to move. Fast. He stumbled toward a chain-link fence, using it to pull himself up. Beyond it was a construction site, piles of steel, half-built walls, and a few workers' sheds. He found one unlocked and slipped inside. The small space smelled of paint and gasoline. He shut the door and collapsed on the floor. He was shivering so hard his teeth clattered. His fingers were blue. But at least he was dry. For now. He looked down at his hands, still cuffed at the wrist. He laughed quietly to himself. Free man in chains, he whispered. In the distance, he could hear the whir of police scanners. They'd be sweeping every dock, every street, every camera feed by dawn. He had hours, maybe less, before they found him. But Marcus wasn't done running yet. He remembered something David had said days before the escape, about an old friend in Queens who owed him a favor, a mechanic who could make things disappear. If Marcus could reach him, maybe he had a chance to stay hidden. He tore off the top half of his jumpsuit and found a construction worker's jacket hanging near the door. It was big enough to cover his cuffs. He pulled the hood up, waited for the rain to soften again, and stepped outside. The city lights shimmered in the distance. Freedom was out there, but so were hundreds of officers looking for him. Back at Rikers, chaos had erupted. Guards searched every tunnel, every drain. The warden was pacing in his office, furious, slamming his fist on the desk. "No one escapes my prison," he shouted. But the truth was undeniable. 2 inmates had vanished from the island, and only one body might ever be found. Divers searched the water for hours. They pulled up debris, bits of plastic, pieces of clothing. At dawn, they found a scrap of orange fabric floating near the bridge. "We got one," a diver yelled. The warden rushed over, but when they lifted it, it was empty. No body, no sign of Marcus. By morning, news helicopters were already hovering above Rikers. The headline flashed everywhere. 2 inmates escaped Rikers Island. Manhunt underway. Reporters camped outside the ferry docks. The mayor held a press conference calling it a massive security failure. The NYPD launched a citywide search. But none of them knew that Marcus Holloway was already watching the city lights from the edge of the Bronx, alive, shaking, and free. He moved through back alleys, staying in the shadows. His shoes squished with every step. The rain turned the street slick and silent. Every passing car made his heart jump. He ducked behind dumpsters, fences, anything that would hide him from view. He spotted a bus stop ahead. A few people stood there, bundled up against the cold. He walked slowly toward them, trying to blend in. The old jacket helped, but his eyes gave him away, wide, alert, desperate. A police cruiser passed by, its lights flashing blue and red. Marcus turned his head, pretending to look at his shoes. The car slowed for a moment. He held his breath. The officers inside scanned the crowd, their faces cold and bored. Then the car moved on. Marcus exhaled, trembling. That was too close. He climbed onto the bus, slid a few stolen coins into the slot, and sat in the back. He didn't know where it was going. He didn't care, as long as it was away from Rikers. Outside the window, the rain streaked down the glass. The city was waking up, people going to work, kids heading to school. None of them had any idea that a man who'd just escaped one of the toughest jails in America was sitting a few feet away, dripping wet and half dead. He stared out at the skyline and whispered, "I made it." But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Not even close. Because somewhere behind him, the police were piecing together clues. The Coast Guard had found a second set of footprints on the shore, smaller ones, leading in the opposite direction. David. He might still be alive. Marcus's heart sank. If David got caught, he'd talk. Not because he wanted to, but because Rikers would make him. And if he did, Marcus's short taste of freedom would end fast. The bus rolled past a newsstand. Marcus glanced at the headlines through the window. His mugshot was already there, bold letters above it reading, "Escape from Hell, the Rikers Island Breakout." He pulled the hood lower over his face. The driver's radio crackled with static and faint voices, police chatter. Words like fugitive, suspect, and armed filled the air. Marcus turned his head and stared out the window, but something caught his eye. A van, black, parked across the street. No logos. Just 2 men inside, watching the bus. His stomach dropped. He knew that look. They weren't regular cops. They were something else. Marcus stood up, ready to move, but then the van's headlights blinked once, and it pulled into traffic, following the bus from behind. He was being hunted. And this time, it wasn't just by the police. The hunters in the shadows. The bus rattled over the wet Bronx streets, its wipers struggling against the heavy rain. Marcus sat in the back, soaked to the bone, staring at a black van in the reflection of the window. It was still there, same distance, same slow crawl. Whoever was inside wasn't in a hurry. They were watching, tracking, waiting. Marcus shifted his hood lower, his pulse thudding in his ears. He'd escaped Rikers Island. He'd survived the East River. But now, on the streets of New York, freedom suddenly felt like another kind of prison, one without walls, but full of eyes. He tried to think fast. The bus would stop soon. If he got off, the van would follow. If he stayed, they'd corner him. He needed a distraction. Something. Anything. An older man across the aisle was reading a newspaper. His face was on the front page. 2 inmates escaped Rikers Island. Marcus felt the man's eyes flick toward him, then back to the paper. He looked again. Longer this time. Marcus turned his head to the window. His reflection looked rough. Wet hair, swollen lip, eyes wide like a hunted animal. He couldn't hide that look of fear. Then the man cleared his throat. "Hey, you okay, son?" Marcus nodded quickly. Yeah, I'm fine." The man squinted, leaning closer. "You look familiar. You on TV or something?" Before Marcus could answer, the bus jerked to a stop. His heart jumped. This was it. He stood up fast, mumbling something, and pushed toward the door. As soon as his foot hit the sidewalk, he heard it, the van's door sliding open behind him. He didn't look back. He ran. Rain slapped his face as he sprinted down the street, his shoes splashing through puddles. He turned the corner, dodging traffic, cutting through a narrow alley between buildings. Behind him came the sound of heavy boots splashing in water. Whoever they were fast. He reached a chain-link fence and climbed, his hands tearing on the metal. A shout echoed behind him. "Stop right there." He dropped down on the other side, landing hard on his knees. His breath came in gasps. He looked around. Darkness, trash cans, the flicker of a dying streetlight. He ducked behind a dumpster and waited. The footsteps grew closer. 2 voices now. One deep, one calm. Sector 4. No sign. His on foot, bleeding. Keep eyes open. Marcus held his breath. The footsteps paused right beside the dumpster. He could see a shadow against the wall, broad shoulders, a flashlight beam moving slow, deliberate. Then the second voice spoke. "If Command finds out we lost him, we're dead. He's not supposed to be alive." Marcus froze. Not supposed to be alive? What did that mean? The men walked off, the sound fading into the rain. Marcus waited another minute, then slipped out from behind the dumpster. His legs trembled as he moved toward the main street again. He found a payphone near a clothes store and picked it up with shaking hands. He didn't have coins, but he didn't need them. He dialed the number from memory. After 2 rings, a sleepy voice answered. "Yeah." Marcus whispered, "Tell Ray I'm coming. It's Slim." The line went quiet. Then the voice said, "You out of your mind, man. The city's crawling with cops." "I don't have a choice," Marcus said. "They know I'm alive." A pause. Then, "Queens. Auto lot near 43rd. You got 1 hour before I locked that gate." The line went dead. Marcus hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Queens. He'd have to cross half the city to get there. And now he knew he wasn't just running from the law. Someone else was hunting him, and they didn't want him caught. They wanted him gone. He started walking, keeping to side streets and alleys, his breath fogging in the cold. The rain had turned to mist now, making the city look almost ghostly. He passed storefronts, cars, people, none of them knowing the man walking by had just escaped Rikers Island hours ago. A police siren wailed somewhere behind him, making him duck into an old laundromat. The lights inside flickered, and an old woman behind the counter gave him a tired look. "We're closed." He held up his hands. "Just need to warm up, please." She hesitated, then nodded toward the corner. 5 minutes. Marcus sat near a dryer, feeling its weak heat against his skin. The smell of soap and wet clothes filled the air. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like a piece of the world he hadn't touched in years. Then, from outside, a shadow passed a window. Another. 2 figures again, dressed in dark coats. Marcus's stomach tightened. The same men. He stood, moving toward the back exit, heart pounding. He pushed open the door and stepped into another alley. The sound of the city faded behind him, replaced by silence and dripping water. He looked around. Empty. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of a streetlight overhead. He turned a corner and froze. David Raines stood there, soaked, bleeding from his shoulder, eyes wide with shock. "Marcus," he whispered. Marcus couldn't speak. He thought David was dead. "I made it," David said, his voice breaking. "I thought you—" Before he could finish, headlights flared at the end of the alley. A black van screeched to a stop. Doors flew open. "Run!" Marcus shouted. They bolted down the alley, side by side, rain flying off their clothes. Bullets hit the walls behind them, warning shots, or maybe not. They didn't look back. They turned into another street, lungs burning, feet pounding on wet pavement. A car horn blared as they cut across traffic. David grabbed Marcus's arm. "This isn't cops. Man, these guys ain't wearing badges." Marcus nodded, gasping. "Then we keep moving." They ran into an old subway entrance, rusted and half-flooded. The air was damp, thick, and smelled of mold. They splashed down the steps as the sound of boots followed from above. In the darkness below, Marcus could hear the rumble of an approaching train. He looked at David. "You ready?" David grinned weakly. "Always." They jumped down onto the tracks just as the train roared into the station, wind blasting past them. The van's men reached the platform seconds later, flashlights cutting through the dust, but Marcus and David were gone, swallowed by the tunnels. The men cursed and radioed in. "We lost them again. They're in the subway system." Back in the darkness, Marcus and David crouched behind a pillar, breathing hard. The sound of the train faded away, replaced by dripping water and the hum of electricity. David looked at Marcus, his face pale. "You know what this means, right? They ain't after us 'cause we escaped. They're after us 'cause we saw something." Marcus frowned. "Saw what?" David hesitated. "The tunnels. There was a door down there. Man, one that wasn't supposed to be there. I think we found something they've been hiding under Rikers." Marcus stared at him, trying to understand. "Hiding what?" Before David could answer, a deep metallic clang echoed through the tunnels, like a door being slammed shut somewhere far behind them. Then a voice over a loudspeaker. "Cold. Mechanical. Containment protocol activated." The lights flickered. The air grew still. Marcus and David exchanged a terrified look. Whatever secret was buried under Rikers Island had just been awakened. The secret beneath Rikers. Marcus and David crouched in the pitch-black tunnel, soaked and gasping for breath. The last thing they heard was that cold, mechanical voice echoing through the walls. Containment protocol activated. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered on. What they saw didn't look like a subway. It looked like something built under the city, a forgotten world of concrete tunnels lined with steel doors and rusted warning signs. The air was heavy with dust and electricity. A low humming sound came from deep below, like an engine that had never stopped running. David whispered, "This ain't no subway, bro. This is something else." Marcus ran his hand along the wall. It wasn't brick. It was smooth metal, stamped with the letters DOC, Section X09. No map of Rikers ever showed this place. No inmate was supposed to even know it existed. Then they heard footsteps. Slow, uneven, dragging through the tunnel. A man appeared from the shadows wearing an old correctional officer's uniform, one that hadn't been used in decades. His face was pale, eyes hollow, like someone who hadn't seen daylight in years. "Turn back," he said quietly, holding a flickering lantern. "No one makes it out from here." Marcus took a step forward, desperate. "Please, we just need a way out." The man shook his head. "There's no out, son. Rikers goes deeper than you think." Before they could ask what he meant, the lights flickered again, and the man vanished. His lantern fell to the ground but stayed lit, casting a trembling glow across the tunnel floor. They pressed on, following faint signs toward what looked like an old maintenance area. Inside, they found dusty blueprints spread across a metal table. On one page, the words Rikers Island Expansion, 1973, was stamped in faded ink. The map showed something no one ever talked about: underground chambers built beneath the prison, stretching all the way under the East River. Some connected to sealed-off subway lines, others led straight into the city. Marcus stared at it, realization hitting him. They built something down here years ago, something they buried. Then, static hissed through an old speaker on the wall. Unauthorized presence detected. Lockdown commencing. Doors began slamming shut behind them, one after another, echoing through the tunnels. The path they came from was gone. Sirens wailed. Red lights spun. Somewhere behind them, boots pounded the floor. The hunters were back. Marcus and David ran through the narrow corridors, their shadows flickering under the emergency lights. "Don't shoot," one of the hunters shouted. "They want them alive." The men in black were fast and coordinated. Not cops, not guards. Something else. Marcus and David slid down a maintenance shaft, landing in a lower level filled with pipes and steam. Above them, they heard the radio crackle. "They've reached level 3. Send the retrieval team." Marcus froze. "Retrieval team," he muttered. "What the hell are we to them?" They stumbled into a large circular chamber with a heavy steel door and walls lined with old computer screens still glowing faintly. The room hummed like a living thing. David stepped closer to one of the monitors and wiped off the dust. The screen flickered, then came to life. Grainy black and white footage played, old prisoners chained to tables, guards in outdated uniforms, injections, screaming. Then came text on the bottom corner: Behavioral Containment Project, active phase. David's face went pale. This was under Rikers the whole time. Suddenly, the footage changed. 2 faces appeared on the screen, Marcus and David, labeled active subjects. The steel door behind them slammed shut. Red lights exploded across the chamber. A robotic voice spoke calmly. "Containment re-established. Reinitializing experiment protocol." The floor trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Marcus grabbed David's arm. "They knew it come here," he whispered. The camera pans out as alarms echo through the tunnels. Somewhere far above, Rikers Island itself begins to rumble. And deep underground, the real reason for their imprisonment and escape is just beginning to wake up.